encourage everyone to go ahead and take a seat. We're going to get started again. And as most of you know, for the last several weeks, we have been doing a series we were calling Why Are We Here? And we've been talking about all of the things that we're doing together as a church and in some ways reminding ourselves why it is that we're here and what it is that we're doing. Some of that's just a reminder of what we all already know and signed up for in the beginning, but also taking some time to rethink what it is that we're doing, to challenge what it is that we're doing, and ask ourselves if we're, are we doing the things that we're doing for sensible reasons, and are we doing them in a way that's genuinely pleasing to God and the best possible way to do them. So it's a reminder, and it's also a challenge and a rethink. And so we've talked a lot about all the things that we're doing together on Sunday morning, and those things really apply to everybody. But what we want to do today is really talk about, what are we doing with our kids? And so asked Sarah, our children's pastor, and Crystal, who's been her right hand for years at this point, to share with us their heart and the things that God's spoken to them about our ministry to our kids. And so we're going to do an interview style talk this morning about what it is that we are doing together as a church with our children. So we wanted to start off with two discussion questions. We've been doing a small group discussion most weeks here at Coast, and we're going to start off with a discussion question. And these are the two questions that we're going to start off with. You can pick which one of these questions applies to you. The first one is, if you grew up knowing Jesus, when did your relationship with Jesus start to feel like your own? And how did that come about? And then for the rest of us, what was a place or a relationship where you felt deeply accepted, wanted, and seen as a child? And what is it that made you feel that way? So you can pick whichever of these two questions feels most appropriate to you. And before we break up into small groups, Crystal and Sarah are going to answer the questions for us.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Crystal. It's funny. I'm so used to talking in front of kids, and I have no nerves in front of these kids. So right now, I'm just trying to pretend that you're all 6-year-olds. But to answer the question it was so long ago since I was in Sunday school. It took a while to really think and pray about that. But I remember hearing stories of Noah and Abraham and hearing all these stories and answering their questions. And also for me, I was so shy. I just never wanted to have the wrong answer. So sometimes I just never really put my hand up in the air to answer. But the time that God just became real to me was when it became a two-way conversation, and it became a two-way conversation with my parents. I had a question about one of the stories. I was kind of a little scared. Maybe I forget what story it was. It was a little scary for me as a 8-year-old or so, but I asked my parents about it, and hey, this was a little scary, and I'm not quite sure about this. Can you talk to me about that? This is my question then. I don't have an answer. And my mom was able to calm my fears and tell me about who Jesus was, and that's just what made it real to me. I knew that God was real. I could see Jesus through what my mom was saying, and how she was just loving me for not having the right answer. And so I feel like that's kind of what made it real for me. It became my own.
Hi, I'm Sarah. I'm also going to pretend you're 6. I didn't grow up with Jesus. I came to know him on my own, at 17, 18. So I'll answer the second question, which is, Michelle will repeat it really quick
What was a place or relationship where you felt deeply accepted, wanted, and seen as a child? What made you feel that way?
Yeah, so outside of home, there was a neighbor who, we lived in a all Spanish-speaking community, and my mom spoke English, but a lot of people there were first generation from Mexico. And there was a neighbor who didn't have very many kids. I come from a really big family. There's 9 of us. And I would go to her house every single day. And she and her husband were just, available. And that's all it really was. And she would brush my hair and take me to run errands with her. And she was a good friend of my mom, so my mom had full confidence that it was fine. I'd go to the swap meet with her, and she just had time. She had time and availability, and I think that's really what made me feel seen. And there was always something cooking or music playing, and it felt very warm, and no bells and whistles, but just availability. So that made me feel really seen.
Thanks to both of you guys for sharing. So I want to invite the rest of us at this point to break up into small groups. Get in a group of about 3 people. This way everybody has a chance to share, preferably including at least one person you didn't come with. And we're going to take 5 minutes for everyone else to have a chance to answer this question, and then we're going to come back and get to our interview. All right, we're going to come back together again. So just go ahead and rotate your seat back to the front. And we're going to go ahead and start our interview with Sara and Crystal. So the first question is this. So at our Sunday gatherings every week, we all come here to the park, and we split adults and kids and teenagers after we worship for a while through song, and the kids and the teens each have their own teaching time. So what would you say is the purpose of having a separate teaching for the kids?
Can you guys? Okay, sorry. I think at Coast, kids ministry is not seen as something to do with the kids while the adults get service. I think we have an intentionality that really wants to support where the kids are at this age and at this milestone, and really engage with them in an intentional way. We started a new curriculum, but what we were doing before was very like sing-songy, and it was a great curriculum, but it felt like we kind of can let the videos take over a little bit if we wanted to. And I love the interaction that we can do with the kids as we are teaching the story. And I love to hear what comes from their own thoughts. And so separating them in that way seems like a space to give them a space of their own. They help us create it as far as like the mood and how we engage with them. We really are able to work with what we have, in the sense of like, if someone's having a hard time, we interact with that and engage with that and support them. And so it gives us a special place to go and be with them in this space on a Sunday morning that feels like it belongs to them. What would you add?
Yeah, I would definitely agree. Just to create a spot that they can be themselves and that they are accepted for who they are. And for the kids we have now, they all have very different type of learning styles and just different ways that they want to sit, like they want to wiggle out. We'll give them the space to do that. Especially for my son, like he wants to sit in the shade, but not directly under the tree because he doesn't want anything to be to fall on him. Like we accommodate that, so we make sure that they feel safe, they feel welcome, and that this is their space that they can take ownership of.
And then you guys have talked a lot about this curriculum that we've started, the godly play and the intentionality behind really everything that you're doing with the kids on a Sunday. Can you guys just walk us through what a typical Sunday kids teaching time is like?
Yeah, so we have been meeting in the park recently, and so we've had to adjust a little bit. We had more of a set schedule when we were in a building, but Godly Play is pretty flexible, so we've made it our own here in the park. And essentially what we do is we welcome the kids each by name. I would look them all in the eye, or whoever's teaching, and say hello and have a moment of recognizing that they're there, and we're happy you're here, and how have you been? And we have a small enough group right now where we can do that, and I feel really lucky about that. And so Godly Play is a storytelling curriculum, and so every story that we tell is intentional for this age group, and it meets them where they're at. So we welcome the kids, have them do a time of prayer. We get together and sometimes I can see that like they need to stretch or wiggle, and so we'll engage that. And then it comes down to story time, and the storyteller is fully immersed in the story. And then the other person who's helping is considered the doorkeeper. So they kind of like keep the door, attend to the door when we had a building. And they just see what the children need at that time. And like I'm watching Wendy right now, she's talking to someone and the storyteller is still telling the story. And it'll still, be told, and that kiddo doesn't need to go sit another place or be dismissed or something like that. We have ways that we try to re-engage them. And the story is told from a perspective of really how it happened in the Bible. We do leave out some like gory details, but it does give the kids a way of hearing it in a way that is factual and isn't, in my opinion, like covered with a bunch of sing-songy stuff in that, kind of takes away from the message. And then there's a time where we invite them to reflect. And so reflection would look like engaging with different art material or different manipulatives or things that we have on hand. And usually they have to do with the story, but we don't tell them what to do with it. We may give them 2 characters and they decide who's Hagar and who's Sarah. And they decide if one is happy and one is sad. And we might be able to reflect on that based on how they respond with their art. And so, then we close, and there's an opportunity, before we close, there's an opportunity for them to share their art and to share their reflection. And in that time, they're invited to also just sit and be. And so if they just want to spend time being quiet, they're totally allowed to do that. And some of the responses you get from these kiddos are amazing. The way they see the story can be so different from the story we've read over and over. And that is so refreshing. What would you add?
I just love being the storyteller with Godly Play. Like you tell the story very slowly, and you take each piece of, it's very Montessori-like. You take the pieces out of the box. It's like a golden box or like this treasure box, and you just continue to add to the story. One time we talked about Abraham and Sarah in the desert, and we got to pour sand onto this tray. And I remember for Daryl, that really got his attention. Like, oh, sand, what's going on? And then you always start, as a storyteller, you say, I wonder what the sand is. I wonder what this wooden person is. And the kids get a chance to really shout out their answers. The doorkeeper can help with answering some questions during that time, but you get them questioning, like, what's happening? Gets them excited. And it just brings the story to life. And as you take each piece out, and you just say, I wonder what this is. I wonder what this blue paper is. It's like they can shout, it's a river, it's this ocean, it's anything. There's no wrong answer. They get to make it their own. And that just helps them really reflect on like what this is. And even when they have their artwork time afterwards, when they try to apply it to themselves and get this time to just think, it's like they can draw, they can play with Play-Doh, they can make a character out of Play-Doh, they can just sit and just think. And it just gives them many different ways, no matter how old the child is, how to respond. So that's one thing I really like about it.
One thing you said, Crystal, that I just think is absolutely fascinating was this, that they would call out and say what something is. So if I'm understanding you right, when you're telling the story, the kids are not expected to like sit and be quiet.
Oh no.
Can you say more about that? So they're not expected to be silent while you're telling them the story?
Do you have any other things?
So you're not going to have a ball game in the crowd. It's not havoc or chaos, but it's a way that keeps them, rather than being just
sitting still and listening.
Yeah, and sort of just receiving, they're engaged, if that makes sense. So often, like if we're watching something, we're receiving entertainment or information, and this invites them to be a part of it. And so, yeah, when the desert is dangerous and the desert is hot and it's so many different parts of our stories come out of the desert, it's something that's alive. And yeah, like Daryl, the way Daryl responds often is that he'll want to play with the actual story. And my son is the same way. And I think it stays with them in a different way than just watching a video, just having a worksheet to color. So when we say that they are allowed to interact, it's interaction, and it's calm, and we've done a lot of training and coming together as a team to say, how can we support this? And so there's a lot of nice ways to do that without it getting out of hand.
I like that. So playing with the actual story pieces is one of the options during the reflection time. Yeah. And then how do you respond to like the kids? So if I'm in your class and I shout out, "Oh, is it a river?" Then how do you respond to the kids' comments?
I would say, "I wonder if it is a river."
Yeah, you
and then
acknowledge
they say,
what they say.
"I think it is. I've heard this story before." And they might have heard the story. And often one of the questions we say is, have you heard this story before? And if you have, what's the same thing and what's different? And that really gets them thinking in ways that are really interesting to see, like, oh, I bet they've read this story before. Or someone will say, I never knew there was more than Noah and his wife. Excuse me. I never knew that it was also Noah's sons. And that can be missed when it's just a little video or like just a little book. But what's alive in front of them, and we show them each son, it somehow sticks more.
So you're not telling them ever if their answer is right or if their answer is wrong.
No, not per se. Sometimes they'll say, like, I think it's a big chocolate bar, because we'll pull out a mat that's dark brown, and it does look like a chocolate bar. And we'll say, oh, that's such a big chocolate bar, would be wonderful. And then they see what it turns into, and you'll hear one of them say, I don't think it's a chocolate bar. I think it's... And then they see it coming alive in front of them, like, oh, it's actually part of, this or that.
Just shows that every answer is valued. You don't have to have the right answer, and it just lets them be themselves and feel like, hey, I'm a part of this. I'm not just the listener. I'm a part of this story.
Wow.
And I think the really important undertone of that is that it allows kids to wonder, and it allows them to ask questions, not just receive information. And that's what we want. We want kiddos to be curious about Jesus, not just take in information and say, okay, check, got that, memorize that, but rather have an interaction. And we trust that the Holy Spirit is showing up and having that interaction with us.
And this is true if they decide to share some art that they made as well, right? The way that you respond, if they share their art, is really similar, yeah?
Yeah.
Can you say a little bit about that?
Just having them, it can be really scary kind of sharing your artwork and sharing something that you made, but we are always respond in a positive way. It's like, that is amazing. Tell me more about this. Like for the rainbow, like after the flood, it's like, just how's that make you feel? Like kind of more than just like, oh, you did a great job, but like how's that make you feel? How is that making you smile today?
So one thing that's really interesting about all this, it's all very experiential, and it's very different from what a lot of people are used to, say, in a school environment where there's this expectation that certain things will be learned today, and the kids will be able to recite or do a specific thing that they were taught. And instead you've got this just desire for kids to engage and to respond and in whatever way they choose to engage, however they feel respond. And I love this, like the non-evaluation. I love this thing about not telling them. It's funny, Sarah and I had a time early on with this where we're talking about the kids' artwork, and I forget, one of us at one point named something that we liked in one kid's picture, and another kid immediately just added I think it might have been a rainbow. Another kid, like, okay, they added a rainbow to theirs. We thought, oh, we blew it. You know, like we complimented the rainbow, and then somebody else felt like they had to make a rainbow. And so I love this kind of very intentional, like non-evaluation and just encouragement to engage. I think it's incredible. But it's really different from what a lot of people are used to. So one thing I'm wondering about is, you know, how can parents continue to support their kids in their learning? So when their kid comes back from the lesson on Sunday, you know, how would it be appropriate for parents to engage and just to support their kids in their learning?
I would just encourage the kids encourage the parents just to continue the wonder questions. So, like, I wonder how this makes you feel, or I wonder, like I'm sorry.
I would even start with something small, like, I wonder who you sat by today. Who did you sit by? And that will bring up a range of things that you kind of aren't even prepared for. Like, I sat by Annabeth and she drew X, Y, and Z. And then it starts opening up. Because as you know, as parents, when you send your kids off to school, you go, how did it go? Fine. What did you do? Nothing. What was your favorite part? Recess. What did you learn? I don't know. But it comes out in different ways, right? And so I think even this is similar in that if we say, like, what was it? And what did you... Not with all kids, but with a lot of kids, it creates a sense of tension. Like, oh, now I have to regurgitate everything that I learned. And I think if you're just curious about what occurred and, like, what happened, then you start to get more of probably what we want as parents of, like, oh, I learned about... So I've asked questions to Drew, who's this age, and I've said, you know, I wonder what happened in the story that seemed like it was scary. Was there any scary parts? And he goes, well, when she had to put her baby by the river. And I'm like, oh. And he would have never been able to say, like, today we learned the story of Moses. But you know what I mean? In that way, he goes, that was kind of scary. Like, what happened, you know? And so you know your own kiddo, and you can trust that you know, you will be able to sort of, like, bring these things out of them. So we ask I wonder questions a lot, and also, like, follow-up questions, like, over at reflection time, we'll ask something like, I wonder what was in the story that could have been you. If you were in that story, which one would you have been? So you could always ask that. Not even being able to name the story per se, but you could say, in the characters today, who would you have been? Or who would you have not been? Those are really interesting responses.
All right. You've also talked a lot about wanting our church to minister to each other as families. So I think, you know, on the one hand, there's this philosophy of how we're doing, you know, Sunday teaching with the kids, but on the other, I think there's this piece that we've been talking a lot about lately that is both, you know, part of the philosophy of how we're doing things on Sundays, but also really a desire for our church as a whole to minister to each other as families. Can you explain what you mean by that and why that's important to you?
Yeah, so our I think our church right now is a great example of how different kids need different things. I've seen some thrive in different curriculums and different spaces, and others in other curriculums. And so I think what we're trying to do is really be able to get to know the kiddo, but also, like, what is going on in their life, what's going on in their parents' life, like, and so supporting each other as families as a bigger picture than just a Sunday, to be able to do life together in a way that feels like this is a safe place for us to land. I know a lot of you shared today that home felt like a safe place when you were a kiddo growing up. And I would hope that for us as part of this Coast family, that we would feel that same way here. And so my desire would be that as we love your children, teach your children, that we would also be able to do that with you, but also with each other.
Yeah, for children's ministry, we only have the kids here for 1 hour a week, and so that's why families are important. We want to be here to support you guys throughout the week, and just to be able to get to know everyone's kids too is also kind of brings people closer, and and also to know that all kids have their own challenges. Like with my kid having a meltdown over there, just being able to love all the kids for who they are. Um, and I guess I just want to say, for parenting, for me, like it's, I'm sure for others, it's one of the hardest things I've ever done. um, it's especially for having a child that has special needs, and it's so easy to become isolated because your kids are what my kids is on the autism spectrum is so into routine, and it's hard to change the routine and kind of getting used to new things. It takes them a while. But it's just so easy to get isolated and kind of go throughout your day and just kind of like push people away because of either fear of judgment or fear of like, oh, they're not going to understand, or I'm always having to apologize for my kids' behavior, not really wanting to kind of go into it. But just, I guess for an example is when one of my friends, while we're putting this presentation together, like one of my friends called and said, hey, like my child just stopped talking. He's like almost 3. It's like, and I know your kid's on the autism spectrum, but maybe my kid is too. And she was able to reach out and ask for help, and actually also just ask many questions that are on her in her mind. And I was able to share my experience too in the early days too, about getting a diagnosis. But she also told me that that past Sunday, like she got called in early to pick up her son from the Sunday school, and they said, we can't have your kid here. He's too destructive, and we just can't have him here. And that was it. That was putting up a wall between her and the community she was hoping to engage with. So that's something I don't want to see ever at Coast Kids. I want to be able to have a place that the kids are valued, no matter who they are or what they're dealing with. And also, if I know that if my kid is accepted, I'm accepted too. And I'm loved, and I'm a part of this family. And that's one thing I want to say thank you for everyone for loving my kid, Jamie. No matter like what's going on then that day, if he's having a good day, a bad day. But that's one thing that makes me feel supported by you guys, is that you get to know Mike as well. So I want to say thank you.
Yeah. We've talked a lot just over the recent weeks and months about just how many kids at our church would fall in the category of kids with special needs, and even like struggling with what's the right language to use for this when really all of our kids are special and all of our kids have special needs, and yet you don't want to downplay how hard it is for some families when there are really significant challenges. And so and we've talked a lot about how much we want to, as a community, learn how to love each other's kids and how to support each other as families better. And there have been a few specific ideas that have been thrown around. Can you share a little bit about just some of the ideas that we've talked about?
I'll start. Hello? Okay. So Crystal and I had imagined and hoped for a group where parents feel supported, mom and dad, in different aspects. And not just with parenting, but with making decisions regarding the next step and the next stage, and being able to do that together, learn together. And I love the idea of even being mentored by people who have already gone through these all these stages. And so we've imagined a support, not like a support group per se, but a group that comes together as parents and refines each other, steps in for each other, understands each other. And it's a place that's safe to be vulnerable and to not know the answer and to ask around, and to also have a place where you know that, for instance, your child's tantrum isn't a fault of your own and your lack of parenting. They're struggling, and sometimes it takes a long time even for us as parents to know that. And so someone coming beside you, being able to help you with that next step, if you are struggling with different behaviors that you don't know is going on with your or why it's going on with your kiddo. And so we're looking to see how we could do that best. There is an idea in the works with Crystal's mom, who happens to be an expert in many of these areas. So she'll tell you a little bit about that.
Yes, my mom, Dawn Perry, she just recently retired and moved down here to be close to the grandkids and me and my family. But she has a master's in child development, and she actually has been teaching with the UC Davis Extension for about 20 years, teaching early childhood educators about any type of child development topic. But one thing she was kind of sharing with me is maybe teaching a temperament class. One thing is that sometimes parents have a very different temperament than their kids, and it can definitely clash many, many times. But if you are able to just be educated in different temperaments and like how to approach each type, like that can actually help grow relationships between you and your kids.
And the way we see that supporting Coast parents is that not only as Sunday school teachers, but as being parents ourselves and doing life together, we can learn more about not only our own children, but the kids who come here. And I think some of you may know this, but the more adults that our children interact with that are believers, the science shows, or the studies shows, that actually speaks to their own relationship later on. So it's not just us they're watching, they're seeing us all as a family. And I think it's an opportunity to really engage that idea and come beside not only each other, but our kiddos.
So stay tuned on that. We've been thinking about trying to create some kind of an opportunity for parents to get together and just learn about each other's kids and families and learn how we can support each other. We've been trying to figure out like what to do about childcare at a meeting like that. Would it be best for people to bring their kids? Would it be best to provide childcare? Would people want to do their own childcare? And even just how hard it is to get to something like that. But stay tuned, and we may be asking you about what would work for you. And then we wanted to move to just a time of Q&A. But before we do that, do you have anything else that you guys want to add that we didn't have a chance to cover?
I think the one thing I would add is that I think the other part of Godly Play that seems really special to me is that it really sets kids up for asking those hard questions. Like when Crystal shared that she asked some questions to her mom, they know that questions are okay. And I don't know about your faith journey, but I received the message that questions weren't okay at some point, and actually no questions showed like greater faith. And I hope that they know that questions are wonderful and that we don't have to understand it first time, and it might take us a lifetime, but that we can continue to wonder and ask and figure those out together.
Well, I want to just take some time to see if we have any questions people would want to ask of Sara and Crystal. So if you have a question, maybe just stand where you are and speak loudly, and then I'll repeat it in the microphone to make sure that everybody has heard it. Or if you're sitting close to the back, you could scoot up a little bit, and then. But yeah, any questions for Sara and or Crystal? I'm going to give it just a minute because I know sometimes it takes a little while to think of them or to feel like it's your turn. Yeah, Carmina. So just repeating for the people on Zoom, if someone wants to learn more about Godly Play and what theories are involved and how it works, where would they find out more about it?
Yeah, good question. So Godly Play has their own website, and it's something that has their own website, and it's something that's been taught for over 20 years. And so that is a good place to start. It's godlyplay.org. And you can talk to us. I mean, we're learning as we go. I've been to a few really good trainings, which has been really helpful for me as leading this project. And we've also had a few trainings here to teach how to be a storyteller and what are the sort of nuances of Godly Play. So I would say chat with us and check out the Godly Play website.
And some of the lessons are actually on YouTube as well.
Oh, thank you for reminding me, Rob. If you're on Zoom, you can text me your question. I've got my phone. I can read your phone out loud. Or actually, if you just you guys are live on Zoom, so you'll come through our speakers. So if you turn your mic on and you ask a question, we can all hear you. So if you're on Zoom and you want to ask a question, you can either text me or you can just speak out loud. Yeah, Patrick. So
that's a good question.
One second, let me just repeat for the people on Zoom. So with this whole non-evaluative, open-ended thing where the kids get to say what they think on their own, what do you do if some kid comes up with something that's really completely off base theologically that might be a problem? So go ahead.
Yeah, so I would engage that question. And rather than saying, of course God's not mad, and just that's that, I would say, the story tells us that this is what happened because of this, and explain the story again. And then if they had more questions, I'd say, well, the Bible tells us that. And my go-to would always be, like, let's see what Scripture says. Like, let's check that out together. And we could use, like, grown-up Bible, or we could go back to the story. But essentially, we would always redirect, let's see what the Bible says. Does the Bible say that God's angry? And if it does, why was he angry? And what does God say about Jesus? And when did Jesus come into the story? And how did that change the wrath of God per se? And we continue down that way. And you figure that out together rather than, I have all the answers, you need to learn all the answers I have, if that makes sense.
So repeating again the question for people on Zoom, how do you respond to a child who seems to be disengaged? And then also a question about, like, cultural flexibility. Does this work well in different cultural contexts, and has it been tried in different cultural contexts?
Want me to answer that? Yeah, so Godly Play is actually taught all over the world in every language. And what makes it neat is you don't need any kind of fancy props or setups. You're essentially going back to the oldest way of humans engaging, which is storytelling. It's something you don't have to have all the accolades for, per se. And so people teach it all parts of the world, all over the place, in every language. And I think, from what I understand, I think you're kind of asking about learning styles, right? And how that plays into it. The neat piece of Godly Play is that it kind of it relates to every learning style. So some children are just listeners and observers, and some children want to engage in a louder way, and so it not only takes like a tactile interest or the kids can take like a tactile interest, also art. It also involves interacting and just listening. And so I probably missed one of the learning styles, but essentially it engages all of them. And there are some kiddos that are quiet, and us as teachers are expected to be the observer. And so the kid doesn't need to be loud and put themselves in front of you in order for you to know them. And that's our job, right? My job is to watch the kiddos and really see who they are and try to engage at their level rather than expecting them to be an extrovert or and so we take a lot of time getting to know these kiddos and asking essentially, will you let me in for the quieter ones?
This is a little bit of a tangent, but I wanted to share a little story too. I've wanted to be involved and get over and hang out with the kids sometimes, and I got to be a doorkeeper in one of our early first lessons using Godly Play, and it's a little bit more difficult here in the park because we have no doors for the doorkeepers. But when you're inside a building, the kids go inside to hear the story when they're ready. So they decide they want to go in and sit down and hear the story. And we had one kid who just wasn't ready. And I think I spent It was actually Crystal's son, and I spent like most of my morning just sitting outside the classroom, looking at books with him and talking to him about just life. And I had the most wonderful morning, and it was great. I felt so good that it wasn't like, this is what's required of you right now. You know, we don't like make the adults go to church and sit down and listen to a lesson. And he wasn't ready, so we didn't go in. And it was really, I had the most wonderful morning.
He did too.
And I think that highlights that Michelle got to know him, right? And so she will know how to engage with him better the next, couple times. The other thing I wanted to just mention, circling back to our other question, is I've seen kiddos who are great at listening and great at responding to worksheets and different things like that. And I felt like I still didn't know them, because they did everything they were supposed to, and they were just the ideal student. And that was wonderful. That works for like a really big class. But in this situation where we have a smaller space and we have less children, I've been able to get to know some kiddos in a different way, because it gives them space to be who they are, rather than, color in this thing and do this thing and check off the list. It was like, what did you make out of that? And you're like, wow, you made that. Okay, tell me more about that. And it gave them a little bit more space to go outside the lines, if we should say.
Well, we wanted to end our time this morning by just having a chance to pray for our children's workers. And so, as always, we're kind of constantly on the fly trying to figure out how we're going to orchestrate things during the pandemic. And so here's what we're going to do. We're going to take some time just to pray for all of our children's workers, Sarah and Crystal, but also everyone else who serves with our kids, either as storytellers or doorkeepers. And so what I want to do, we're having the kids and their teachers heading back right now. So I want to ask you, if you are one of our children's volunteers, if you could just stand where you are so that we can see you, so we can see who it is that we are trying to pray for. So just stand up wherever you are if you are actively involved in serving in our kids ministry. And then some of us are going to be comfortable having a crowd of people come around us and lay hands on us, and some of us, would prefer a little bit of distance. So I'm going to ask you now to put up your hand if you would feel comfortable having people come around and lay hands on you. So put your hand up. Just raise up your hand if you would feel comfortable having people come and lay hands on you. And keep those hands up. And everybody else, you are all the prayer team this morning. So everyone else, look around. Keep your hands up if your hands are up so we can see you. Everyone else, look around. Find somebody, including these two. I'm just standing so I can talk, not me. But these two and everybody else out here who's standing. Find someone who's standing that you can pray for. If they're not raising their hand, please stand 6 feet from them while you're praying for them. And if they are, that's an indication that it's okay for you to come and lay hands on them. And we're just going to gather around. So gather around anybody that you see standing, and pray for them from whatever is an appropriate distance. And then we'll end with a final song. Justin will come up while we're praying and start to lead us in a song. And once again, you're all the ministry team. Let's get up from our seats. Let's go bless our teachers. And if you're joining us on Zoom, same thing. We've got you live, so if you unmute yourself and speak on Zoom, we'll be able to hear you here in the park. So you can pray with us as well.